The icy wind howled across the empty plains, slicing through Mark's heavy coat like knives. He kept his head low, his goggles frosted with ice. Every step felt heavier as the blizzard raged around him. His boots crunched over frozen rocks and buried ice patches. The storm was getting worse, but he couldn't turn back now. Mark had seen something, a figure, just a few minutes ago. At first he thought it was a trick of the light. But no, it was real. Someone was out there. Someone who needed help. His heart pounded as he pushed forward, fighting the wind. His hands were freezing inside his gloves, and his backpack felt heavier with every step. Around him, the world was a blur of white and gray. It would have been so easy to get lost here, so easy to disappear forever. Suddenly, through the swirling snow, he saw her. A small shape, curled up against a jagged rock, barely moving. She looked fragile, almost like a statue made of ice. Mark's breath caught in his throat. He hurried to her side, dropping to his knees. She was trembling badly. Her clothes were torn and thin, offering no protection against the deadly cold. Her skin was a pale bluish color, and her silver hair was tangled and stiff with frost. She wasn't human. Mark realized that instantly. She was alien. But right now she was just a life slipping away. Hey, it's okay, Mark said, his voice rough from the cold. Her eyes opened slightly, big, glassy, and full of terror. She tried to move away, but she was too weak. Mark didn't waste time. He pulled off his heavy jacket and wrapped it around her shivering body. She gasped, clutching the warm fabric with frozen fingers. The moment the warmth touched her skin, she broke down. Big, silent tears streamed down her face. She tried to hide them, turning her face into the jacket. But Mark saw everything. It's okay, Mark said again gently. You're safe now. I promise. He looked around. They couldn't stay out here. The storm would bury them both. He had to get her somewhere safe. And fast. Mark slid his arms under her, lifting her carefully. She was lighter than he expected, almost like a child. She whimpered softly but didn't resist. She was too tired to fight. The walk back to his shelter was a nightmare. The storm had covered his tracks, and every direction looked the same. Mark trusted his compass and his memory, forcing his frozen legs to move, step after step, through knee-deep snow and biting winds. The alien girl pressed her face against his chest, trying to hide from the cold. Mark tightened his grip around her. Just hold on, he whispered. After what felt like hours, Mark finally spotted the small entrance to his cave shelter, a narrow opening between two massive rocks. He stumbled inside, dropping to his knees as the wind howled outside. Inside it was dark but warmer. Mark set her down gently on a bed of furs he had gathered. He quickly pulled out a thermal blanket from his supplies, wrapping her up tightly. Then he lit a small fire in the corner using special sticks that burned even in low oxygen. The girl watched him with wide, fearful eyes, still clutching his jacket like it was a lifeline. Mark crouched beside her, offering a warm metal cup. Drink, he said softly. She sniffed the warm liquid, just heated water mixed with nutrients. And after a moment's hesitation, she sipped. A little color returned to her pale cheeks. You're gonna be okay, Mark said, trying to smile. She stared at him for a long time, her lower lip trembling. Then very slowly she whispered something in a language Mark didn't understand. Her voice was soft and broken. He didn't need to understand the words. He understood the meaning. She was thanking him. Mark sat beside her, staying close to keep her calm. Outside, the storm screamed across the frozen world. But inside the little cave, a small flame flickered, casting a warm light over two lost souls, one human, one alien, finding hope in the middle of nowhere. And somewhere deep inside, Mark knew. Saving her wasn't just an act of kindness, it was the beginning of something much bigger, something that would change both their lives forever. The fire crackled quietly in the small cave. The storm outside screamed like a wild beast, but inside it was almost too silent. Mark sat near the fire, glancing now and then at the alien girl wrapped tightly in his jacket and blanket. She hadn't said another word since whispering thanks. She just sat there, her knees pulled to her chest, her silver hair falling over her face. She shivered slightly even though the warmth was rising around them. Mark set down another cup of warm water beside her. "You need to drink more," he said, gently. She didn't move. He sighed and leaned back against the cold rock wall. His body ached from carrying her through the storm. His fingers were still numb despite the heat. But none of that mattered now. Because deep inside, something kept bothering him. She wasn't just scared of the cold, she was scared of something else. Mark noticed the way her head snapped toward every small noise outside. Even the harmless crack of ice shifting in the distance made her tense up. Her entire body seemed wired, like she expected someone or something to burst in at any second. Mark tried to ease the tension. "My name's Mark," he said, speaking slowly and clearly. He pointed to himself. "Mark." The girl stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she lifted a trembling hand and pointed at herself. Her voice was barely more than a breath. "Alyara," she said. Mark smiled warmly. "Alyara, nice to meet you." But she didn't smile back. Instead, she turned her face away, pulling the blanket tighter. Mark caught a glimpse of bruises along her arms, ugly, dark marks against her pale skin. He felt a surge of anger in his chest. Someone had hurt her badly. Someone had chased her out into the freezing storm to die. But who, and why? He didn't ask her yet. He knew she wouldn't answer. Not tonight. Maybe not even tomorrow. Trust took time, especially when someone had been hurt this badly. Suddenly, a loud scratching sound echoed from outside. Both Mark and Alyara froze. The hairs on the back of Mark's neck stood up. He slowly reached for his old pulse rifle lying beside the fire. Alyara's eyes widened with terror, and she clutched the blanket closer, shrinking into the wall. The scratching grew louder, more frantic. Something, or someone, was moving around. The rocks outside. Mark raised a finger to his lips, signaling Alyara to stay quiet. He moved silently toward the entrance of the cave, pressing his back against the cold stone. His heart hammered in his chest. The scratching stopped. The silence stretched so long it became unbearable. Then came the low, guttural growl. Mark's grip tightened on his rifle. He peeked out into the raging snowstorm, but saw nothing, just swirling snow and shadows. He stepped back inside carefully. "We stay here," he whispered. "Quiet." Alyara nodded quickly, her whole body trembling again. Mark built up the fire a little, keeping it low so it wouldn't shine too bright and give away their position. He didn't know what was out there yet. But whatever it was hunting, and not just animals, it was hunting her. Hours passed, but neither of them slept. Alyara sat close to the fire now, staring into the flames as if trying to lose herself. Mark kept his rifle ready, listening to every sound outside. He thought about her strange bruises, her thin, ragged clothes, and her fear. Something terrible had happened to her. He didn't know what, but one thing was sure. This girl wasn't just lost. She was running from something much worse than the cold. And now, whatever hunted her, knew she wasn't alone anymore. The wind screamed louder as night dragged on. Snow whipped across the cave entrance like angry ghosts. Mark sat with his rifle resting on his lap, eyes wide open, muscles tight. He hadn't moved in hours. Neither had Alyara. She sat wrapped in, the blanket still trembling. Her silver hair shimmered faintly in the firelight, her wide alien eyes darting nervously toward the entrance. Every few minutes, Mark had a terrible feeling growing in his chest. Something was out there, watching, waiting. And it wasn't just the cold or some wild animal. Suddenly, the fire flickered unnaturally as if something sucked the air from the cave. For a brief second, Mark's heart stopped. He glanced at Alyara. She had noticed it too, her eyes locked onto the entrance, terror freezing her in place. Then they heard it. A faint crunch of snow. Another, then another. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Coming closer. Mark rose to his feet silently, rifle raised. His breath came in slow, shallow pulls. Even Alyara seemed to hold her breath. The steps grew louder. Through the swirling snow at the mouth of the cave, Mark caught a glimpse of a figure. Tall, hunched, and moving oddly, as if sniffing the air. A second shadow appeared behind the first. Mark cursed under his breath. There were two of them, maybe more. He motioned for Alyara to stay back. She shrank against the wall, her hands clenching the blanket so tightly her knuckles turned white. The shadows lingered outside the cave, pacing slowly back and forth, almost like they were testing something. Searching. Sniffing. Mark's blood ran, cold. They weren't hunting by sight. They were hunting by scent, and the fire's smoke. It would betray them soon. Mark lowered the fire even more, tossing snow over the flames until it became little more than glowing embers. The cave plunged into near darkness, but at least the smoke thinned out. He crept closer to the entrance, moving like a ghost. Outside he could hear the creatures clearer now. Low growls, harsh breathing, heavy steps crunching in the snow. Then, he saw one of them clearly for the first time. It was not a normal animal. It was a creature built for killing. Black, sinewy muscles under rough skin, long arms ending in sharp claws, a flat face twisted into a permanent snarl. Its eyes were wide and blank, glowing faintly against the snowstorm. Mark's mind raced. This thing wasn't from this planet either. Maybe not even from Alyara's world. What the hell had she gotten herself into? And now, what had he gotten himself into? The creature paused, sniffing again. Its nose lifted into the air. It knew they were close. Mark slowly raised his rifle. He didn't want to fire unless absolutely necessary. A shot would echo across the frozen land and bring more trouble. But if that thing came any closer, he wouldn't have a choice. A sudden noise made Mark flinch, a small whimper from behind him. Alyara. The creature heard it too. It let out a loud guttural roar, a sound that made the ground beneath Mark's feet vibrate. Then it charged. Mark didn't think. He squeezed the trigger. The yow. Rifle flashed, lighting up the cave for an instant. The bullet hit the creature square in the chest, knocking it back into the storm with a howl. But the second shadow moved fast. Before Mark could reload, it lunged at the entrance, claws scraping along the stone. Mark dropped low, firing a second shot. Sparks flew as the bullet ricocheted off the rocks. The creature hissed and retreated into the storm. But not far. Mark slammed a heavy rock against the cave entrance, blocking part of it. Not perfect protection, but better than nothing. He turned, back to Alyara, who was sobbing quietly, terror written all over her face. "It's okay," Mark lied, kneeling beside her. "I'm here. I won't let them take you." But deep inside, he wasn't sure. The creatures had found them, and they would be back with more. Mark realized with a sinking feeling, this wasn't a random storm, it was a hunt, and they were the prey. The storm raged outside, but inside the cave it was deathly still. Mark sat against the wall, rifle tight in his grip, his eyes never leaving the half-blocked entrance. Alyara huddled close to the far wall, hidden in the deepest shadow she could find. Her trembling had stopped, replaced by a frozen stillness, the kind only pure fear could cause. The creatures were still out there, waiting, watching. Mark could feel it in the air, a pressure, a weight that made it hard to breathe. The fire had died down completely now, leaving the cave cloaked in darkness except for the faint blue glow of the storm filtering through cracks in the rocks. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Time stretched and twisted. Mark fought against the tiredness, pulling at his mind. One mistake, one blink too long, and it would all be over. Then it happened. A single sound shattered the tense silence. Tap. A claw scraped against the stone outside. Tap, tap. Another and another. The sound grew louder, faster, like 100 nails scratching at once. Mark's heart hammered against his ribs. Alyara pressed her hands over her mouth, trying not to cry out. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the cave as a massive force slammed against the entrance. The rocks Mark had stacked trembled, some tumbling to the ground. They were trying to break in. Mark jumped to his feet, rifle raised, aiming at the entrance. Another crash, and another. Cracks spread across the rocks like spiderwebs. "They're coming," Mark whispered, mostly to himself. Alyara looked at him with wide, desperate eyes. She tried to speak, but only choked sounds came out. Mark scanned the cave quickly. No way out, no back tunnel, only this one entrance, and the monsters beyond it. Another crash, and the rocks exploded inward. Snow and dust filled the air as the creatures burst through. 3 of them, maybe more, hulking, twisted things, their eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. Mark fired without thinking. The first shot caught the lead creature in the shoulder. It stumbled, roaring in pain, but didn't fall. Mark fired again, another hit, but the creature kept coming. The second beast lunged, claws swiping through the dust. Mark ducked, feeling the wind of the blow rush over his head. He rolled aside, narrowly avoiding a second slash. The third creature rushed straight toward Alyara. Mark saw it out of the corner of his eye. "No!" he shouted, diving between her and the beast. The creature slammed into him like a freight train, throwing him across the cave. He crashed against the rocky wall, pain exploding through his body. His rifle skidded away across the ground. Mark groaned, reaching for it, but the first creature pinned him down with a clawed foot, pressing the air from his lungs. It leaned, close, its breath hot and foul, its mouth splitting open in a snarl. Mark struggled uselessly. Was this how it ended? Was this how Alyara's hope died too? Suddenly, a burst of bright blue light filled the cave. Mark turned his head weakly and saw Alyara standing tall, her hands raised, her silver hair whipping around her face like a living storm. Her body glowed with a fierce inner light. Energy crackled around her fingers. With a scream of pure fury, Alyara unleashed the power. A shockwave blasted out from her, slamming into the creatures. The beasts roared in pain, thrown back into the walls. One hit the ceiling so hard that chunks of rock rained down. Mark gasped in awe. Alyara stumbled, the glow around her flickering, but she stayed standing. The creatures weren't dead, but they were hurt, stunned. Mark forced himself up, grabbing his rifle. He aimed carefully this time. One shot right into the first creature's eye. It collapsed with a thud. The second tried to crawl away. Mark finished it with another shot. The third fled into the storm, howling in pain and fear. Silence fell. Only the crackle of falling dust and Mark's ragged breathing filled the cave. He turned to Alyara, who was swaying on her feet, her face pale. He caught her before she collapsed. "You saved us," he whispered. Her eyes fluttered open briefly. A tiny broken smile crossed her lips. And for the first time, Mark realized something terrifying. They had survived the first attack. But this was only the beginning. Whatever Alyara was running from, it was far bigger, far darker than he had ever imagined. And now, he was part of it. The morning after the attack was colder than ever. Mark sat at the mouth of the cave, staring into the endless white rifle across his knees. His body ached from bruises and his head throbbed from lack of sleep. Behind him, Alyara slept fitfully, wrapped in every blanket he could find. Her face was pale, her breathing weak. Mark clenched his fists. They couldn't stay here anymore. The creatures knew where they were now. Next time, they wouldn't come alone. Mark checked the sky. No sun. Just thick gray clouds spinning over the frozen wasteland. The storm had passed, but it left behind a deadly silence, the kind that made every hair on his body stand on edge. He packed quickly, a few supplies, the rifle, the water purifier, and then he gently lifted Alyara into his arms again. She stirred but didn't wake. "I'll get us out of here," he promised her softly, but deep down he had no idea where to go. Snow stretched in every direction. No landmarks, no shelter, only death. Mark stumbled forward, carrying Alyara as best he could. The cold bit into him, stealing his strength with every step. His boots crunched over hard ice, slipped over buried rocks. Hours passed, maybe longer. Mark's vision blurred at the edges. His legs shook. He wanted to fall, just lay down, close his eyes and sleep. But every time he looked at Alyara's fragile face, he forced himself onward. Suddenly, the ground beneath him cracked. Mark froze. A deep rumbling filled the air. Before he could react, the ice beneath his feet shattered, and he fell. Down into darkness. He landed hard on something soft. Snow piled deep inside a massive underground cavern. Mark groaned, carefully checking Alyara. She was alive, still breathing. He slowly sat up, blinking. And then he saw it. His breath caught in his throat. Spread out before him, stretching far beyond the reach of his flashlight, was a city. An ancient city, frozen under the ice. Massive towers of crystal and stone jutted from the frozen ground, their tops broken and buried under centuries of snow. Strange carvings marked the walls, symbols and designs unlike anything Mark had ever seen before. Bridges, statues, broken plazas, all frozen in time. Mark staggered to his feet, his exhaustion forgotten. Where were they? Who had built this place? And why was it buried here, hidden from the world? Alyara stirred in his arms, her eyes fluttering open. The moment she saw the frozen city, she gasped softly. Tears welled in her eyes, not from fear, but from recognition. She knew this place. Mark set her down gently on a nearby stone bench. "What is this?" he asked. Alyara struggled to sit up. Her voice was faint but clear. "My people built this," she whispered. "Long ago. Before the wars. Before everything." Mark listened, stunned, as she told the story. Thousands of years ago, Alyara's ancestors had ruled this planet. A proud, noble race. They built cities that touched the sky and harnessed powers beyond human understanding. But greed and betrayal had torn them apart. The survivors had fled underground, sealing away their greatest treasures and secrets beneath the ice. This city was one of their last refugees, a tomb of lost knowledge and lost hope. Mark looked around with new eyes. The broken towers, the cracked statues. They weren't ruins of defeat. They were monuments to a civilization that had tried to escape its own destruction. But why had Alyara ended up here? Before he could ask, a low hum filled the air. Mark spun around, raising his rifle instinctively. From the shadows of the nearest tower, something moved. Not one of the beasts. Something else. A figure. Tall, cloaked, and watching. Mark's blood ran cold. They weren't alone in the frozen city, and whoever was down here had been waiting a long, long time. The frozen city groaned under the weight of time. Every step echoed through the ruins like a shout in a cathedral. And somewhere deep within those shadows, something, or someone, waited. Mark kept his rifle raised, scanning every broken pillar, every fallen archway. Beside him, Alyara struggled to walk, her body weak but her spirit burning strong. Her silver hair clung to her face, and her wide, fearful eyes never left the darkness ahead. "Stay close," Mark whispered, though he knew it was useless. If danger came, it would come fast. The cloaked figure moved again, gliding between the shattered columns like a ghost. It didn't charge. It didn't attack. It simply watched. Mark's finger tightened on the trigger. Then the figure stopped, and slowly raised empty hands in a peaceful gesture. Mark froze. No weapon, no attack. Instead, the figure spoke, a strange musical language that Mark didn't understand, but Alyara did. She gasped, stepping forward before Mark could stop her. They spoke rapidly in the alien tongue. Alyara's voice trembled with fear, but also with hope. Mark couldn't understand the words, but he understood the emotion. This wasn't just a stranger. This was someone Alyara knew. After a long moment, Alyara turned to Mark, tears glistening in her eyes. He wants to help," she said in a shaky voice. He's a guardian, one of the old protectors. Mark lowered his rifle slightly, but suspicion still burned inside him. Then why was he hiding? Mark asked. Alyara looked down, shame filling her face. Because he doesn't trust humans, she said softly. He thinks you will betray me. The words hit Mark harder than he expected. Betray her, after everything he had risked for her? He glanced at the guardian, tall, proud, silent, a relic of a dying world. Then he looked at Alyara, fragile, hurt, but still fighting for life. Mark understood. In a world filled with monsters, trust was the rarest thing of all. The guardian spoke again, his voice low and commanding. Alyara translated, her hands shaking. He says we must leave. There is a way out, but only if I stay with him. Alone. Mark's stomach twisted. They wanted him to leave. To walk away. To abandon her. Alyara's voice cracked as she spoke. He says, "You have done enough," he says. "If you stay, you will die." Mark stepped back, feeling the weight of the decision crushing him. He could leave now. Save himself. Let the ancient guardian protect her. It would be the smart thing, the safe thing. But when he looked at Alyara's face, full of silent pleading, he knew. He couldn't walk away. Not after seeing her cry over a simple jacket. Not after hearing her whisper for help in the dark. He had made a promise the moment he wrapped that jacket around her trembling body. He wasn't leaving. Mark took a deep breath and stepped forward, standing between Alyara and the guardian. "No," he said firmly. "If she goes, I go." Alyara gasped. The guardian's eyes narrowed beneath the hood. He spoke again, sharply, a warning, a threat. Mark didn't flinch. He didn't need to understand the words. His choice was made. He turned to Alyara, offering his hand. "I promised I'd protect you," he said softly. "I'm not breaking that promise." For a long moment, Alyara just stared at him. Then, with tears falling freely, she reached out and placed her trembling hand in his. Mark squeezed her hand gently. Together, they faced the guardian. For better or worse, they were in this together. Now no more running, no more hiding. The guardian studied them for a long time. Then slowly he lowered his hood, revealing a scarred, noble face marked by centuries of loss. He bowed his head in respect, a silent acceptance. He would lead them both. The path ahead would be harder, more dangerous. But it didn't matter. Because, sometimes in a broken world, trust was stronger than fear. The frozen city seemed to come alive as Mark, Alyara, and the guardian moved deeper into the ruins. Strange lights flickered beneath the ice. Shadows shifted between the broken towers. The air grew heavier, thicker, as if the ancient stones themselves were holding their breath. Mark's grip tightened around his rifle. Every step forward felt like a step closer to something terrible. They didn't speak. There was no need. They all knew what was coming. At the heart of the city they found it. A giant open plaza, half buried in snow and ice. In the center stood a massive black obelisk, cracked and bleeding strange blue light. Around it, dark shapes moved, dozens of the monstrous hunters that had chased Alyara before. But these weren't just wild beasts anymore. They were organized, waiting for her. The guardian stepped forward, his voice low and steady. Alyara translated quickly. "They know I'm here," she said, her voice trembling. "They will not let us leave." Mark nodded grimly. He expected nothing less. The guardian pulled out a strange glowing staff, ancient technology, humming with hidden power. Mark checked his rifle, loaded the last few rounds he had left. Alyara stood between them, her hands glowing faintly, ready to call upon her inner strength again. They were outnumbered, outmatched, but they weren't alone anymore. They had each other. The first creature lunged from the shadows, snarling. Mark fired instantly, dropping it mid-leap. Another charged, from the left. The Guardian moved like a flash, his staff slicing through the air, sending a wave of blue energy crashing into the beasts. The battle exploded into chaos. Mark fought with everything he had. He moved fast, using the ruins for cover, his shots quick and precise. But there were too many. Claws slashed across his arm. He cried out, rolling away and blasting another beast point blank. Alyara stood at the center of the plaza, her body glowing brighter and brighter. She unleashed bursts of energy, throwing attackers back with raw force. Her face was a mask of fear and determination. The Guardian fought beside her, his every movement graceful and deadly, ancient skills honed over centuries. But the beasts kept coming. For everyone they killed, two more took its place. Mark stumbled, blood dripping from his wounds. His rifle clicked empty. He swung it like a club, smashing it into a creature's snarling face. Across the plaza, Alyara screamed. A beast had grabbed her, pulling her toward the obelisk. "No," Mark shouted. Without thinking, he charged. He tackled the beast, ripping it away from her. He punched, kicked, fought like a wild animal. The beast slashed his side, but Mark didn't stop. He would not let them take her, not while he still breathed. Alyara fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. She reached inside herself, drawing on the last of her hidden power. And then, she touched the ground. A wave of light exploded from her body, flooding the entire plaza. The beasts screamed, their bodies disintegrating into dust under the blinding energy. When the light faded, the plaza was silent. The obelisk cracked completely, collapsing into a pile of broken stone. The Guardian dropped to one knee, exhausted but alive. Mark lay gasping on the ground, his vision blurry with pain, and Alyara, glowing softly like a star, crawled to his side. She pressed her small hands against his bleeding wounds, her power flowing into him. Warmth spread through Mark's body. The pain dulled. His breathing steadied. He looked up into her tear-filled eyes. "You stayed," she whispered brokenly. "You stayed for me." Mark smiled weakly. "Always." The Guardian approached and spoke solemnly. Alyara translated through her sobs. "He says, 'You have proven yourself. You are one of us now.'" Mark chuckled, coughing a little. "Guess that makes me part alien." Alyara laughed through her tears, a soft, broken sound that somehow filled the whole plaza with warmth. Mark struggled to his feet, pulling her into a gentle hug. Above them, the heavy clouds began to part for the first time. A sliver of sunlight touched the frozen city, making the ice sparkle like diamonds. The nightmare was over, but the journey was just beginning. Together, human, alien, and ancient Guardian, they would rebuild a new home, a new future standing side by side.